Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time once again to square off and look who's over there. Yes, it's another Square Off exclusive as we welcome back a longtime friend of this show, former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, past chairman of the Republican National Committee, who in May of 2011 was hired as a political analyst by MSNBC. He is also a columnist for the online magazine The Roof. Please welcome back Michael Steele.
It is
Mike,
so good. It is so good to be back with you. And also, not only am I an analyst now, I've got my own show at MSNBC. It has been a great. We launched earlier this year, the weekend, Saturday and Sundays from 8 to 10 a.m. So man, I'm blessed. It's just I'm doing your show. I got my show. I'm showing out.
you're shown out. I tell you what, my next paragraph on the script says. Michael, congratulations on being named co-host of MSNBC's all-new Saturday and Sunday program from 8 to 10 a.m. the weekend with your partners Simone Sanders Townsend and Alicia Menendez. It's fabulous, and you seem so relaxed and so talented on this program. How do you like it?
I love it. It's good. You know, the one thing that we really wanted to do, Richard, is really what you do and have done for so many years here in Baltimore, in the Baltimore market. And that's just have a conversation. Let's get past all of the titles and the performative aspects of politics and try to get people to sort of open up and not just share what you really think, but just be honest about what's happening and just say this is what it is and this is how we get through it and deal with it and these are some of the options. And so it's been working pretty well. And I think a big part of it is we have guests on set. COVID changed a lot, as you know, and it changed the behavior of how we interact with each other, how we engage. And so we wanted to make sure we could get people back in studio on set with the hosts, around the table, and just have the conversation. And so far, the public likes it, and I'm blessed and very fortunate to be able to do it.
Very great. Well, before we get to the real news of the day, here's a quote that I found in an article. It said, Michael Steele has become a staple on the left-leaning MSNBC cable news channel. And then they say the only news channel that has seen its ratings go up in the year 2023. So, as we say, mazel tov.
Well, thank you. Look, I remember when I left the RNC and went to MSNBC, as you noted at the beginning in 2011. I got a lot of blowback from Republicans, who, in typical fashion, started the name calling. Oh, I knew he was a rhino. He's going to this liberal network, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, so let me ask you this, idiot. If you have a chance to take your values and your point of view, your opinion on various issues, the policies that you advocate for, and plant that flag on a national liberal network as a conservative, wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? If they want that programming, they want their audience to be exposed to the other side, if you will, of the messaging. Yes, you take advantage of it. And for the first 8 years, that was pretty much what we did. And then, things changed in 2016 and first 5 years. And in 2016, 16 things changed because then it became more about personality politics, performative politics. There wasn't a lot of policy coming from the Republican side and made the conversation more difficult. But yeah, I mean, I long for that. I tell my friends, my liberal friends, oh, you like me now because we're fighting, about democracy and preserving the rule of law and all of that. But when we get back to policy, y'all not gonna like me too much because I'm still that guy who, fired Pelosi. So,
That's true.
it's still part of the conversation, and it is one of those things that I love and enjoy doing, as having the conversation, and that's what I get to do.
All right, let's get to the news. If our viewers can look on the right side of their screen, I guess it is. But anyway, behind your left shoulder, your
Right,
actual left shoulder, is
right,
a
right.
says Hopkins. And Hopkins is really hopping in the news. Here in Baltimore, you graduated in 1981 from the Johns Hopkins University here in Baltimore, where the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli encampment continues to grow. Now they're protesting Hopkins' ties to companies that support Israel in their war with Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
It's your campus. What do you think about what they're doing there?
Well, look, and I've had this conversation with a number of folks. Of course, Columbia University being one of the sparks in all of this, and then of course looking at it in the 10 or 12 other universities that are engaged in this debate slash protest. Everybody has the right to do that. I may not agree with their analysis, or I may agree with their analysis, but regardless, they absolutely have the right to make that protest, to express their points of view. But there are some realities that go along with this as well, and it is fully understanding the circumstances. The plight of the Palestinian people is at the heart of this. And not just this administration, but other administrations in the past and those in the future will still have to contend with this issue. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has made it very clear what his authority lines are and what his mission is. He's been able to get support of his coalition government to prosecute this war the way they have. And the honest fact is, I do not see any universities seriously divesting their interest in companies that do business with Israel, because that will change absolutely nothing. It will not move the needle. You may feel better, but Palestinians will still die at the hands of Hamas and this war. And so there are bigger, broader questions that need to be addressed on that front. The Biden administration, has been doing that. I think they're very close now to getting an extended ceasefire in place, which would be very important. Leveling up the humanitarian aid as well, and beginning to move the needle on the two-state solution, which the Netanyahu government or coalition government has been resistant to, more on the conservative side of that coalition government than the other members of the coalition who want to see something resolved here. So, it's one of those things that individual universities are going to make their decisions. Ultimately, I served on the board of Hopkins. I was serving on the board of Hopkins at the time. Students, my classmates, because I had recently graduated Hopkins in 81, and by 84, 85, there were protests about divestment in South Africa. And I remember those conversations and the discussions and the efforts around that by both the administration and the students. And I'm sure the same is true here for Hopkins today on this issue. They'll resolve it, and we'll see how it ultimately ends up. But the last point I'll make on this, and to make it very clear, if anyone thinks that Donald Trump is going to offer a different solution here, I don't know what you're smoking, but it ain't good, because that's just not good. That's not the case. Trump is aligned with Netanyahu on this issue, and has been very clear about that publicly, although he's kept quiet on this because it's not to his political advantage to insert himself in this conversation And as I've said on a number of occasions, Richard, I'm waiting for the press to put the microphone in front of Donald Trump's face as he walks out of his trial to ask him not about the trial, but all these protests are going, do you stand with the students? Do you stand, what would be your policy? Do you stand with Netanyahu in prosecuting this war with impunity, or are you concerned about the extent to which they're indiscriminately killing Palestinian children and women? And so these are important questions for these candidates who are running for the office to address. We'll see how that plays out, and we'll see how the universities, which seemingly they have come to some resolution in a number of cases, how this plays out over the summer and into the fall.
Well, you know that the pro-Palestinian protesters seem to have forgotten that Hamas actually started this war when they attacked Israel on October 7th, killing 1,400 Israelis, yes, including 1,000 civilians. If you were president of Hopkins University and you asked and you ordered them, please, nicely, to please take down their encampments, and instead they've grown their encampments, what would you do? As the
I probably look. You obviously are going to have the conversation with students directly. There's a very delicate balance between your right to protest and the disruption that comes from that, particularly as the university is getting ready for graduations and exams and other things that other students who may feel the way those students who are protesting feel, but aren't out there protesting because they want to graduate, or they've got to get ready to get home for summer employment or other opportunities. And so you've got to figure out the balance there. I think, though, in the main, at a certain point, you go, the encampment is just not working on the university campus right now. Sorry, they got to go. And you've had them up for a week or whatever. We get the point. And we understand that, but the disruption to the majority of the campus life and parents who've paid a whole lot of money to get their kids through Johns Hopkins University do not want to have to, watch the graduation ceremonies disrupted or not held at all. Saturday Night Live this past weekend did a great cold open on that. And, you have a lot of parents who want to make sure that, what is that, Vanessa Roberts, whatever her name was, his daughter graduates. So it's a delicate balance. I don't envy the president and the board having to work through this. I remember our having to work through it back in the 80s. And it was difficult. It just is.
All right. Here's what we have to do, Michael, because we want to get to Donald Trump.
Okay.
I want to ask you about him. But in the meantime, it's time to thank our 4 sponsors. Michael, I want you to see once again one of your favorite people, Howard Mallison, the voice of Square Off.
Howard!
Hi, Michael. Pappas Restaurants and Sports Bars, one of Michael's favorites, by the way, has been voted best crab cake year after year by readers' polls, and it's Oprah's favorite. It's also Michael's favorite. 4 locations with the newest in Bel Air. And also, Leading Edge Auto Body and Mechanical Repair want you to know that the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. Not at all. Call Leading Edge at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in the heart of Mount Washington. And also our good friend, attorney Barry Glazer, who will help you get the compensation you are entitled. Barry has a doctor and nurse on staff. So for personal injury, medical malpractice, or nursing home neglect, call Barry Glazer, 410-547-8568. And your friendly neighborhood Double T Diners, from Route 40 West to Annapolis and everywhere in between. The Double T Diners are the area's #1 choice for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Double T, totally terrific. Back to you, Richard and Michael.
All right. Thank you, Howard. Excellent job.
Very good.
Keep you on another week. Okay. So Michael Steele, our exclusive interview, Michael's back from his 5th or 6th time on Square Off. We love him, and we love having him as our guest. So let's get to one of your favorite topics. You've sharply criticized former President Trump for his inability to admit that he lost the last presidential election, and he's afraid of losing again in November, because, as you've said, it will hit the most important thing to him, his ego. Talk about Trump. And
well, you know, to be honest, I'm tired of talking about Trump, but it is the big thing in the room. The reality of it is he is an anti-democratic, illiberal candidate for the presidency, who tried to overturn the results of a duly executed election, and in 2020 refused to this day to concede that race, despite the lawsuits that failed and the investigations and the audits and everything that happened in the battleground states. So I think that, you know, we're at a point, Richard, where we have to think long and hard about what we, you know, feel about our country. We need to understand that the men and women we elect are an extension of us. They represent our hopes, our fears, our ideals, our sense of the kind of future we want for our kids. And yes, you can be concerned about gas prices. You should be. And inflation, absolutely. Whether roads get built and bridges are made safe. But if your freedoms are stripped away, if your neighbor is suddenly hauled off in the middle of the night and put into a camp because they've been deemed illegal, if your expression of dissent with decisions of the government are met with weaponizing the Department of Justice against you, and what I'm recounting are things that Donald Trump says he will do. Okay, so, and that culminates in, I want to be a dictator because I am your retribution. I don't need a dictator. I need a president. I don't want retribution. I want healing. Our country has been through a lot, from COVID to economic stress with, you know, the economy, families dealing with health issues, the fentanyl crisis. There are a number of things that any president walking into the Oval and sitting behind the Resolute desk would be focused on and should be focused on. But that's not what Donald Trump is focused on. Remember, he's the man during COVID that told us to inject ourselves with bleach. So there is that. So I have a fundamental issue with the man. I don't come at this for some of my Republican friends who think, oh, you're just anti-Trump. I worked with the man before you knew who he was, by the way. Saw that side of him. What was that?
Where did you work with Trump?
Oh, we did. I worked on a project with him back in 2013 or so. You know,
what was he like?
Very much like you see him now. So, so it's consistent. But you know, the reality for me is, I love my country. I love the freedoms that are an important attribute of our life here, particularly given the difficulties that this country has had in freeing its people, if you know what I mean. And we weathered those storms and walked through, but at all times that no one ever say, it's about me, tear up the Constitution because I should be president. I want to be a dictator. I am your retribution. Through all of those difficult times that we've had, we've never had to go there. And I don't think we have to go there now. So that's kind of where I see this thing at this point. And, you know, the people have to make a decision. And they'll tell us who they are and who we are.
And if the election were held today, who do you think would win? Just curious.
Well, I think, I think if the election were held today and when the election is held in November, I think Joe Biden will still have the upper hand, largely because of what I just said. I think people in the main will come around and say, yeah, Afghanistan was a hot mess getting out of that, and inflation is still, a problem, even though it's down, significantly from where it was a year ago. Gas prices the same, but I still have these things that bother me, and I have to trust that the president, President Biden, is going to deal with that. That's not what I'm going to get from Trump, and I think voters are going to make that judgment. So it's a close call, Richard. There's no doubt. I mean, you've got polls that show, I think, in the main across the board, that would say this race is tied. Even there are polls that have Trump up or polls that have Biden up, so they're tied. The final point on that is, polls right now are absolutely worthless, to be honest, especially national polling. Because voters aren't tuned in. And if you ever see a poll that says likely vote of registered voters, throw it in the trash. It means absolutely squat, because it probably has in that poll people who have not voted and likely will not vote in this election. Likely polls with likely voters or voters who express that they are definitely voting. Those polls, even at the national level right now, are a little bit difficult, because they don't necessarily, voters haven't necessarily settled, and they won't begin to settle until Labor Day. That's when polls really begin to mean something, because voters are really dialed in at that point. Kids are back in school, life gets into sort of that fall mode, the election's coming up, people tune in a little bit more, debates happen, etc. So it gives you a better sense of it.
All right, let's move on for a moment. I want to talk about independent presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr., who this past week, he revealed serious health issues that include severe memory loss, mental fog, mercury poisoning, which can lead to neurological problems like loss of peripheral vision, muscle weakness, and issues with movement, hearing, and of course he has a neurological problem with his voice. His heart is in atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular rhythm. And doctors have discovered that a parasite had entered Kennedy's brain, consumed some of it, and then the parasite died, and they removed it. Is he still a viable candidate, do you think?
I mean, irrespective of his health report, no, he's never been a viable candidate for the presidency. I mean, before you even read that list, or he announced that list of health issues, he was not on my bingo card in any shape or form to be a presidential contender. I find it somewhat hysterically ironic at this point that Republicans who were splashing him all over Fox and touting his campaign as something legitimate suddenly have made a reverse, because beforehand what they saw was Robert Kennedy hurting Joe Biden, but now the polling is showing, their internal polling is showing, and I know this is how you know it's internal polling, because their position has changed, because the internal polling is showing that he's drawing from Trump. So he is not a contender for either candidates, for either parties, in terms of what he will do to the other. And I think that his health issues now disclosed does put a lot of things in perspective, and one more consideration for voters to take into account as they look at their presidential ballots in November. But no, he's never been a serious contender for the office. He was always a gadfly. He was always there to, I think, initially to hurt Joe Biden, which is why he started in the Democratic primary. That fell flat fairly quickly. He shifted to running with independents, now scrambling to get on the ballot with the libertarians, who are all over the place, and other third-party ways to access ballots, and we'll see.
As we wind down, because we could talk to you for at least 3 hours,
All right.
I'm going to just here are the voter concerns. A late poll heading into the November election. I'm just going to name a few of them.
Sure.
And you can give me a very short answer. First of all, the first and number one concern is inflation. Your thoughts on that?
Well, inflation is significantly down from a year ago this time, where it was hovering around 9%. It is now about 3.8, I believe. And in the last couple of months, it has ticked up 1/10 of a point. And I think that's still, the economy sort of, with the Fed actions sort of trying to rebalance itself. I suspect that by the time you get to summer, it will sort of plateau, and may tick down a point or two by the election. So while it's troublesome, I remember when it was 18% and 20%. So I get this is the first time in almost 40 years that people have experienced inflation the way you and I experienced it back in the late 70s and early 80s. And it's a shock to the system, but good management, good Fed policy, which we see the Fed executing right now, I think, and that helped not just the bill that the Congress passed to reduce inflation, but the Fed policy in sort of creating the stabilization for it. I think it brought it down to 3.7, 3.8, and it'll drop some more.
What do you think the access to abortion issue will affect the election?
Oh, it will. It definitely will be a play in this upcoming election across the board. The thing to keep in mind is an issue like abortion is less impactful in congressional races. Not that it isn't. The dynamics are different in a congressional race. In a statewide race, it definitely will be a play. And I draw that distinction because the way our congressional races seats are gerrymandered today, Republicans, largely have significantly red districts where that issue is going to be less of an impact. If that Republican decides to run for the U.S. Senate, for example, or to run for governor in a statewide race, then all those other districts where that issue is a stronger issue are now voting. And so you begin to see how it changes, and why I've raised the flag. Everyone's, the advantage goes to the Republicans for the number of seats that the Democrats have to defend
Right.
for the U.S. Senate. But the abortion issue, the IVF issue, the actions taken by state legislatures to further restrict abortions, what we see playing out in places like Arizona, where they want to impose 1860 law on women and then have to quickly do the backstroke to get out of it. Well, the die was cast. You exposed your hand. You've told women that if you had your preference, you would have them live under a 140-year-old law. So that will have an impact, and it's going to be something that Republicans especially are going to have to, Republican candidates are going to figure out how to work out in statewide races.
All right, our final topic. When you graduated from Hopkins, you taught high school for a year or so, and then you went into the priesthood. You wanted to become a Catholic priest. You
Right.
were 3 years into this. You were almost at ordination time and you decided to go into public service. You've done great at all the things you've done. Do you ever have any regrets for not going through with it? And I could call you Father Michael Steele.
I can never regret the path that God put me on. You cannot go, oh God, why'd you do that? Right? No, I don't have any regrets. That was an important part of my life. It strengthened me and informed my thinking for my public service. My prayer at that time was very much, how do I serve God's people? What do I do it in a business suit, or do I do it in a religious habit? And he, during that course of time, spoke to my heart and said, I have work for you over here, but take this with you. You're going to need it. And I have used it. I used what I learned from my time with the Augustinians, as lieutenant governor, as RNC chairman, and the work I'm doing now. So I have no regrets about the path God has put me on, because he chose the path. I didn't.
Any prediction of the upcoming primary election in Maryland?
Larry Hogan will be the Republican nominee.
Okay, that is fair. Well, listen, you were talking about habit. We've gotten into the habit of watching The Weekend, all new Saturday and Sunday on MSNBC, which is just a wonderful cable network, and we watch it quite a bit.
Thank you.
The others too, to see what's cooking. The Weekend is from 8 to 10 with Simone Sanders Townsend and Alicia Menendez, and continue good luck. We would like to have you for lunch, not eat you for lunch. But we would like to take you to lunch next time you're in our area. You can pick the restaurant or whatever McDonald's location you prefer.
Right. Well, it's going to be Pappas, right? You know that, right?
Of course.
Of course.
Of course. And what's next for Michael Steele? 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Look, we're going to continue to engage in the conversation around our democracy and this grand experiment that our founders have given us. And I'm asking every citizen out there who's eligible to vote, register to vote, vote. Because your future for your kids depends on how you vote today. So it's important.
Michael, it's always great.
All right, my friend. Thank you.
You're the best. And we look forward to having you back here maybe in 2 or 3 months. How about that?
No, let's do a little fall rendition of this as we get closer to the election. We'll have a better sense of the landscape then. It'll be great.
Thank you so much, Michael. You're looking great.
Thank you, sir.
On MSNBC. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for our exclusive with Michael Steele from MSNBC. And we will see you next time here at squareoff.net when once again we square off. Bye-bye, Michael.
Bye-bye, my friend.